next. So the next kind of mitzvah, we spoke about chukim. The next kind are Mishpatim, which are laws of justice. So these are laws that if there was no Torah, we would have to figure this out ourselves. Like we have responsibility to live justly. So the classical example is don't murder. In virtually every society, there were laws against murder. Is that true? So if you have society telling you not to murder, why do you need the Torah to also tell you not to murder? Okay, so think about the United States today. Is murder legal? No. Okay, will all murderers get the same treatment in court? No, everything depends on who the murderer is and who the victim is. Could you see where this is so? Yeah. So if you have a murderer who people relate to well and likable, possibly famous, possibly good looking, and a victim who people don't relate to, okay, will the murderer get off? So in Judaism it's objective. The definition of murder is any killing except if the person is a threat to you. Now, the requirement to put in a plug to begin with is a question. In other words, if a person's life will only be extended very briefly, so it's not so clear that under all circumstances you have to do every possible heroic measure. But to actually do any action that's going to say, once I pull this plug, within 5 minutes the person is dead, no.
What if they're already brain dead?
So brain death is tricky. Perhaps someday we'll have a better criteria for it. But there have been not one, not two, but numerous people who were in long-term vegetative states who were thought to be brain dead, who later turned out not to be. So we need better criteria than we have now. The halacha criteria isn't acceptable to the medical world. The halacha criteria is when any limb or organ is really dead, like let's say a hand that's gangrenous. It produces chemicals. These chemicals say death. If the brain is truly dead, it would produce these chemicals. But in the medical world currently, they don't want to wait that long before they call someone brain dead, because at that point, all of the other organs can't be harvested, because the brain basically controls everything. So it's a problem. I'm not presenting this as a non-problem. It's a problem. The halacha criteria means dead, and the current criteria means lack of observable brain activity, which isn't the same thing. And you also have lots of things that are in between, where you have, the first case of pulling the plug was with Karen Quinlan. Do you remember? You certainly don't remember it, but did you read about it?
Was it like 10 or?
This is like at least 20 years ago. So there was a girl, her name was Karen Quinlan, yeah? So she was taking drugs and also drinking, which isn't a world-class great idea. And then she was in a car crash. And she suffered a neurological trauma. So here she is with the alcohol in her bloodstream and the drugs and the traumatic injury. So she went into, not surprisingly, into a vegetative state. Her parents went to court to be able to pull the plug, okay? And they won, which set the precedent, which makes it permitted now by law, right? But she lived another 6 years.
In this condition?
In basically the same condition, but not attached to a respirator. She actually had independent respiration. So that was surprise, Okay, so it's not. There currently, when good doctors, I'm not suggesting that they're trying to fool anybody, will say there's absolutely no brain activity. It's not as certain as one must think. There was also another case. There was a man with ALS. You know what that is? Yeah. It's a terrible, terrible illness. So his name is. You could go and see him on YouTube. In fact, he's interesting. His name is Rachamim Kohen Melamed. He was diagnosed when he was 53. It was a very strange diagnosis. Also, he had shoulder pain, which he assumed was arthritic or something, but the doctor knew as soon as he examined him that it wasn't, because the pain wasn't at a joint. And so he had tests done, He called him and his wife into the office. Now, whenever they say, come with your wife, it's not a good thing. He told them the news, it is ALS. His wife fainted. They revived her. And then he said, what's going to happen? So he laid it out. He's a very intelligent man. He was the head of the Israeli Special Education Department at the time. And he told him about, like, there are two kinds of ALS. Some of them affect the inner organs first, others affect the outer organs first. Apparently yours is going to go from the outside in, which takes longer. So he asked, what's going to happen? He kept on, what is going to happen? He told him. He said, how long is this going to take? So he said, around 8 years. So he immediately had a stair walking device put in his home and at work. He wanted to stay independent as long as possible. Now let's go fast forward 13 years later, okay, which is when most of his films were made. He's still alive. He's disabled. He's in a wheelchair. He needs something to hold his head up. Because he's very bright, he devised a way of communicating through a computer, which other people now use throughout the world. So it works with infrared, okay, and by blinking, the computer picks up messages. But it's not like one blink is A, 2 blinks are B, and you would need like 22 blinks to do that, okay? It's whole words and phrases. He worked this out. Like right eye, one blink could mean, could you please bring me A? You understand what I'm saying? So they're whole phrases, and like right eye, left eye, up, down, it's very sophisticated. That's how he communicates. He's written 8 books like this. This is, one of them is the Bible of special ed in Israel. And another is a book of poetry. It's very rare for a book of poetry to be a bestseller. His was a bestseller. Okay, and what he does now is that he receives people. He especially wants to meet with young people who are in despair. And he sees his goal in giving people hope. That's what he sees like. As long as you could think and feel, your life has value. So he was on TV a lot of times, like you would have people defending euthanasia, and then they'd bring him out and he'd say, does my life have value or doesn't it have value? Yes or no? There's only yes or no. Who should decide? You? Who are you? Like whatever. Okay, clear? So that's why the Torah is going to say, in an objective sense, don't murder. And the same thing would hold true for all of the laws of logic. In the secular system, even theft. What's theft? Give me a reasonable definition of theft. Taking something that's not yours. Is it accurate to say that all thieves will be treated the same in court? How will they be treated differently?
Depending on what they stole.
Depending
on what they stole.
How much, what, from whom. So the people at the two extreme ends of the spectrum will probably get away with it, and people in the middle won't. Could you see where this is so? Like, Trump hasn't filed taxes in 7 years, but he'll get away with it. But a youth offender who's coming from a bad background, if he stole from a middle-class person, will also get away with it in conventional courts. It's only the people in the middle who have trouble. In Judaism, theft is theft is theft, because we don't think we're judging the person, we're judging the event. Either the money was taken or it wasn't taken. If it was taken, it has to be returned. It has to be returned and there have to be damages paid. Prison isn't a penalty in Halachic Judaism. Why do you think prison isn't a good penalty? Why not? And it's also not victim-oriented. In other words, the victim of the theft doesn't get more money because the thief is in prison.
Right.
So the Judaic system is completely victim-oriented. There's a premise we can't judge people. Okay. So that's Mishpatim. Do you have any questions on Mishpatim or Chukim before we go on to the last category?
So what's the Jewish view on the consequence for the thief?
So the consequence is basically left for God, but restoration and damages are for here and now. Like the thief would have to work and pay back what he stole. And it wouldn't matter, like your feelings for the thief aren't a relevant part of the picture. Okay, so there would be no difference between, let's say, somebody who stole money out of necessity to buy medicine and somebody who stole because they want to buy a sound system or drugs. Because the underlying premise is we can't judge people, so why even try? Okay, this is all clear?